Hello, and welcome to our special Surviving the Storm. I'm Chief Meteorologist Steve Jerve. We're coming to you off the Pinellas County coastline between Caladesi and Honeymoon Island. Tonight, we'll show you why a hurricane that came ashore here a long time ago illustrates why it's important to prepare for hurricane season today. It's one of the world's most stunning stretches of coastline. For people, a place to relax and reflect. For wildlife, a safe haven in an undisturbed natural habitat. But it was nature itself, in a single violent act, that shaped this dazzling and precious environment. This entire area was transformed 100 years ago. A catastrophic storm moved heaven and earth to clear this natural channel, Hurricane Pass, and create the surrounding islands. This corner of Florida's west coast is among the most picturesque and pristine seascapes in the country. Honeymoon and Caladesi Islands are Florida state parks, preserving the natural environment while open to public recreation. The islands are links in the chain of barrier islands hugging the Pinellas coastline. Hurricane Pass is just west of Dunedin. It's the channel that passes between Honeymoon and Caladesi and connects the bay with St. Joseph's Bay. Centuries ago, early explorers were able to chart the barrier islands off the Pinellas coast, marked here as arena or sand. Others mapped the west coast in detail, even identifying St. Joseph's Bay. Honeymoon and Caladesi began as one larger barrier island known as Hog Island. But the 1921 hurricane storm surge was so powerful, it sliced it in two, carving a deep channel midpoint, creating what we now know as Hurricane Pass. This natural upheaval left behind an enticing and popular recreation spot. Yet while the 1921 hurricane resulted in the beauty that surrounds us here, it ravaged the growing city of Tampa a short distance away. Coming up later, we take a closer look at this powerful 20th century hurricane, the misfortune it brought with it, and who and what was able to survive the storm. How many hurricanes will threaten us this year? Forecasters are releasing their predictions and all agree it's likely to be a busy one, although not likely as active as last year. Colorado State University scientists are forecasting 17 named storms, 8 of which will strengthen into hurricanes, and of those, they expect 4 of them to become major hurricanes. NOAA forecasters anticipate 13 to 20 named storms, 6 to 10 hurricanes, and 3 to 5 major hurricanes. The two main reasons for extra activity are the lack of an El Nino effect, which would have created wind shear to help tear storms apart.
We don't really see an El Nino developing and through most of this year, which is not great because El Nino was one thing that does tend to suppress Atlantic hurricane seasonal activity.
And warmer subtropical sea surface temperatures, which create energy to fuel the storms. National Hurricane Center meteorologists work to increase lead time and accuracy. What they can predict is how their message is received.
So often people, when they hear our forecast, are skeptical. They think they know better. They think it won't happen. They're optimistic it won't come here. As our predictions get better and better, we'll start attacking that component.
It's all an effort to inspire greater confidence in the forecast to help people better plan ahead. The pontoon boat we're on is one of almost 1 million registered pleasure boats in the state of Florida. Rebecca Berry shows us how to best prepare your boat for storm season.
We are thinking every day wind velocity and wind direction. And when it gets to a bigger storm, obviously we have to take certain measures.
From schooners to skiffs, Freedom Boat Club Captain Dean Iverson knows boat owners have a lot of extra planning and preparation to do as a tropical system approaches.
Well, you have to consider whether you've got a floating dock or a fixed dock first. That's the hardest part. If you've got a floating dock, it makes it very easy. You just tie it very close to the dock. If you've got a fixed dock, you have to worry about tides, especially surges when it comes to big storms like hurricanes. So that makes it a lot trickier. You've got to make sure you've got equally spread lines and spring lines to make sure it won't run into the dock, it won't get hung up on the dock, it won't get under the dock, that kind of thing.
The best and safest option for your boat is to remove it from the water, either to a trailer or a dry storage facility. Even the lift at your dock is not a great option. They aren't built to withstand high winds or storm surge. But if you can't remove your boat from the water, plan on using a lot more of these.
For most of our boats, we will use spring lines. So when there's any kind of foul weather, big storms, we will put about 4 lines on each boat, at least double, if not triple, all the lines.
If you do trailer your boat, plan ahead where you will park it. Look for high and dry areas away from trees. Remove any bimini or canvas tops that could get caught in high winds. Lower the air pressure in trailer tires and secure with blocks in front of and behind each tire. Lash the boat to the ground or something solid. And finally, remove the boat plug. Making sure your boat survives the storm will mean fun on the water after the hurricane. I'm Max Defender 8 meteorologist Rebecca Berry.
Dogs really enjoy Honeymoon Island Dog Beach, but it takes special planning to keep our 4-legged members of the family safe. Meteorologist Lee Spann and her best friend show us how to make sure pets survive the storm.
Rescue dog Pickles and I do a weekly spotlight of an animal right here at the Humane Society of Tampa Bay, but their brand new building is rated for a Category 4 hurricane, so the staff and animals will stay here during a hurricane. The CEO, though, has some tips for the rest of us pet owners.
You want to be prepared and you want to have a plan, of course.
Sherry Silk, the CEO of the Humane Society of Tampa Bay, stresses that you need to microchip your animals.
Because sometimes the tags fall off, but microchips never fall off, and that is the most permanent identification that you can provide for your pet, whether it's a dog or a cat.
If you are not told to evacuate, consider what you need to hunker down for days in your home.
If your animal's on medication, a lot of animals are, make sure that you have extra medication because a lot of the pharmacies and the vet clinics may close depending on the storm. Make sure that you have at least an extra 7 days of food and obviously in water for your pet.
If you do leave your home, do not leave your pet behind. There are pet-friendly shelters, but Silk says they fill up fast, so get there early or have another place to go. Bring food and medicine, and your pet needs to be up to date on vaccines.
You will not be allowed to go to a shelter if you aren't current on distemper, parvo, and your rabies. If you don't have it, they're not going to let you in. And make sure you have a copy of that record.
Cats need a microchip too, but also a portable litter box.
Like a roaster pan that you can buy, and with plenty of litter, and that just give them a litter box. And even if you're going to shelter in your car.
Pets get anxious when their lives are disrupted during a storm.
They're going to be stressed, and all you can do is try to just keep them as comfortable as you can. Some people have medication for their cats when they're really stressed out. You can talk to your veterinarian about that. Some people use CBD oil on their kitties. Sometimes that works.
And another tip, make sure you have a picture of you with your pet in case you get separated. Lee Spann and Pickles, 8 on your side.
They were warned, but few people believed they were in danger. How they lived to tell the story. Tampa Bay's deadly storm of the century next. Then, knowing how storm surge strikes may help you survive the storm. It was the last great hurricane to make landfall in Tampa Bay. The 1921 Tarpon Springs hurricane not only carved the new coastline, but ruined the city of Tampa. What kind of people lived here then? What kind of damage did it do? And what kind of lessons have we learned in 100 years? Tampa on the threshold of the roaring 20s. Industry, trade, and tourism surged. Life was good until the hurricane. Even with the storm on their doorstep, no one living here then believed it was going to do any serious harm, according to Dr. Brad Massey, curator at the Tampa History Center.
Did they have any perspective on what they were facing in 1921?
They sort of knew at the last second that the storm was coming, but in a lot of ways the city was in denial. There's always this hope that, yeah, there's a bad storm, but it's not going to hit us. It's going to swerve south. It's going to swerve north.
But it didn't. The hurricane moved swiftly and steadily from the Caribbean Sea through the Yucatan Pass and across the Gulf. With winds in excess of 140 miles per hour, it whipped up a tremendous storm surge and hurled its forces up through Tampa Bay, with its eye making landfall just north of Tarpon Springs on October 25th.
The damage is particularly bad along Bayshore. Water gets over the Bayshore Boulevard and it floods a lot of the homes. It's estimated approximately 5 individuals are killed from floodwaters and things like that.
Newspaper headlines and photos of the aftermath tell the story. More than $2 million in damages, according to the Tampa Tribune, and TECO Energy estimated tens of thousands more. In today's dollars, that would be close to $37 billion.
But one of the interesting things is a couple of days after the storm, city boosters try to sort of sweep things under the rug, and they're like, oh no, well, maybe the damage wasn't that bad. But the historical record does make it clear, especially the photographs and some of the other things that we have from the era of the storm, that the damage from the storm was significant.
So were there any lessons learned in the last 100 years?
When you compare, the reaction to the 1921 storm to the reaction of recent storms, you do see the same patterns. And it's that people realize hurricanes are dangerous, but a lot of times they like to pretend that they're not as dangerous as they really are.
The 1921 hurricane forever changed our coastline, but it put downtown Tampa under 10 to 12 feet of water. We asked scientists at the National Hurricane Center to explain storm surge. It's not wind, but floodwater that is the deadliest part of a hurricane, and Tampa Bay is particularly prone to this danger.
There's three things that are contributing to Tampa Bay vulnerability. I'll go ahead and say that Tampa Bay is probably the area I worry about most.
National Hurricane Center storm surge specialist Jamie Rome believes the primary reason we are a target for flooding is due to the geography of our coastline. Tampa Bay is shaped like a funnel. This concentrates storm surge much like a spray nozzle on a hose, forcing water inland. Secondly, the continental shelf extends way out, allowing shallow water to pile up. And third,
it's been so long since the area has been impacted, and there's been so many new residents moving into the area. They traded in their snow blowers for generators and moved to Florida, and they just don't get it.
Hopefully looking back at the fury of the 1921 hurricane storm surge would make an impact on residents today.
I know you're somewhat familiar with that storm that hit Tarpon Springs. It was devastating for the area as a Category 3 storm. It's the 100th anniversary of that storm, so we're going to recognize that storm and try to learn any lessons. What are your thoughts on that day for the Tampa Bay area?
Biggest thing that one is it's been 100 years since Tampa's experienced direct impacts of a major hurricane, and so I think anything that you can derive from that storm is vitally important. Most communities need only look back 6 months or 6 years to get their lessons learned. In fact, if you look back 100 years, really speaks to the vulnerability of Tampa Bay.
More Surviving the Storm coming up. Where do you get information on planning for and surviving the storm if English is not your first language? We'll put you in touch with helpful resources next. The COVID-19 crisis may seem a world away in these wide open spaces, but last year during the most active hurricane season on record, the pandemic swept the globe. As Max Defender 8 meteorologist Ian Oliver tells us, this will all help us better prepare for disaster.
2020 was the most active hurricane season on record.
It's really just preparing for what we're dealt with, right? And in 2020, it was, of course, the pandemic along with that wild season. So it's one of those things that teaches us to be prepared.
30 named tropical systems developed last year. That and a global health crisis made for a historically busy stretch at the National Hurricane Center.
The whole entire time, just kept thinking we can't lose the center. Record-breaking season with a global pandemic. We have to stay safe to make sure we can keep the public safe from these hurricanes.
Do you think going through the disaster last year gives people a new mindset moving into a new season?
Yeah, I hope so, because if you think about how long it's been since some areas have been hit, just because it hasn't happened a long time doesn't mean it can't happen. You have to think about what could happen.
Through the pandemic, we all have learned to be more cautious and just understand that anything could happen at any moment where we have to be prepared.
Preparation is key before every hurricane season. Like we saw last year, when a threat develops, supplies can go quickly. Now, while hoarding isn't necessary, it's always a smart choice to have your hurricane kit stocked before the season.
I do get prepared. I have the flashlight and the batteries and staples, but I don't hoard.
It's probably not going to make much of a difference for me. I mean, I'll stock up a little bit, but nothing crazy.
Thankfully, Florida was spared the brunt of 2020's incredibly active season, with only Tropical Storm Eta making landfall. The northern Gulf Coast experienced the worst of the 2020 season. A record 5 named storms made landfall in Louisiana.
Whether it's a 30-storm record season or there's one storm on Earth, If it impacts you, it's a busy season. You have to prepare as if you're going to be hit every single year.
Now is the time to get ready for what will likely be another active season ahead. I'm Max Defender 8 meteorologist Ian Oliver.
Getting severe storm and emergency information may be more difficult when there's a language barrier. Heather Melendez has a rundown of resources for Spanish speakers.
In Hillsborough County alone, Hispanics make up more than 29% of the population. Some speak only Spanish in the home and at work, and many are elderly. The National Hurricane Center makes a special effort to break the language barrier in providing life-saving information.
You put yourself in the community and a grandfather or a grandmother, and they don't know the language. And you're there, you are the voice that they trust. And not only that, they trust and they will take that in consideration and say, you know what, I'm going to take the safety precautions that this person is telling me because they're telling me in the language that I can understand.
I'm here on 7th Avenue in Ybor City. The 1921 hurricane storm surge reached nearly as high as these balconies. Witnesses at the time say they saw waves breaking on top of the rising water. The flood damaged businesses and destroyed close to 500 homes in Ybor. Trees toppled, houses flattened, ships aground. A catastrophic storm like this can easily happen again. Like Barber Sean Rivera says, we all go about our lives and don't really consider a disaster on our doorstep. Do you know where to find storm information in Spanish?
Actually don't. We normally just Google, listen to the news, meteorologists kind of decipher and make an educated guess from there. You know, we're Floridians, so we're used to it. We're prepared as much as we can be.
One thing that can help is an inexpensive NOAA weather radio. Information is broadcasting in both English and Spanish 24 hours a day.
What happens is that it immediately activates and it tells you, it would alarm you like your alarm clock, and it will tell you, okay, this is the warning for a hurricane warning that is in effect for your area, and it will tell you when will this start.
There are also plenty of online resources in Spanish, including the National Hurricane Center, FEMA, and of course, tampaoy.com. I'm Max Defender 8's Heather Melendez.
A breakthrough in long-range hurricane forecasting went into effect this year. Coming up, we'll explain why a new upgrade will help us all survive the storm. This year, National Hurricane Center forecasters have access to major improvements in the American computer model system. Amanda Holly shows us how GFS, or Global Forecast System, works.
Forecast models help us predict your daily forecast, but also details about tropical systems. They help us determine where the storms are going to go and how strong they'll get. While there are many different models, the GFS, or Global Forecast System, is one of the longer range models, and it just got a major upgrade.
One of the big changes with the new GFS is that it's actually going to assimilate some of the flight level data from the Hurricane Hunter aircraft.
Scientists fly into a storm and drop sensors to get this data. Dr. Michael Brennan with the National Hurricane Center says now the model will begin with this measured wind speed and temperature data from in and around the tropical system. This will give the GFS a more accurate starting point. With this upgrade, the GFS will also better predict how a storm is structured, from the surface of the water all the way to the top of the storm.
Capturing what's going on at the very top of the hurricane, how the outflow comes out of the eye wall and interacts with the rest of the atmosphere, and being able to properly represent that is really important for things like intensity change and the overall impact on the rest of the atmospheric pattern.
This will help determine the path of the storm. To test the upgrades, NOAA runs the new GFS version on past storms to see how it performs. The National Hurricane Center has noticed several improvements.
It's a little better at detecting storm formation. It also shows a little more in terms of false alarms, so it's sort of a mixed bag there, but there will be better increased storm detection for those storms that actually do form. We seem to have a little improved track forecast skill from the GFS for weaker systems.
Forecasting tropical systems is not an easy task, but with upgrades like this one, we can bring you the most accurate forecast and possibly even more days to prepare. Max Defender 8 meteorologist Amanda Holly.
Be prepared. The 8 on Your Side Hurricane Guide has all the local information you need to prepare for the 2021 hurricane season, including where to find a shelter. Go to WFLA.com homepage or the Max Defender 8 app on your smartphone.
We'll be right back. For the entire Max Defender 8 weather team, thank you for joining us here at beautiful Hurricane Pass. To survive this hurricane season, make sure you have a plan, then stick to it. Have a safe and healthy hurricane season. Good night.